Hey gang, welcome to my channel. I'm the Pony 314 and we're doing yet another Enfield today, but not quite like the last one. This is the Enfield No.2 Mark I revolver. Oh, and by the way, if you like this video or any of the others you've watched on this channel, feel free to mash that subscribe button. Okay, now that that's out of the way, on with the video. So, here are the basics. This is a 6-shot double or single action top break revolver with fixed sights, a 5-inch barrel, and is chambered in 38 Smith & Wesson, or if you prefer 38-200. That was the specific round the British Armed Forces issued for this. So here's the reason this revolver exists in the first place, and I admit it is a really difficult thing to wrap my head around. This revolver, introduced in 1932 as a replacement for a long line of Webley service revolvers that dated back about 50 years by then, with the last being the classic Webley Mark VI. Now those were chambered in a pretty powerful 455 Webley cartridge, but after World War I, the conclusion was, probably by people who never had to fire a revolver in their lives, was that the 455 Webley round packed too much recoil to be easily managed. By the way, trust me, if you've ever fired a 357 Magnum, the recoil of a Webley would not impress you, but that's what they concluded. So the decision was handed down to replace that round with a new service cartridge of 38 caliber. Well, the round itself wasn't new. The 38 Smith & Wesson had been around for about 55 years by the time the British adopted it in 1932. But that's another story. On a side note, British ordnance officers stated with complete confidence that the 38-200 round, that being a 38 caliber 200 grain bullet, packed as much punch as the 455 Webley round. That was a load of crap. But no matter how you slice it, the simple truth appears to be that the British Armed Forces appeared to believe their troops couldn't handle a powerful sidearm. Any American soldier at the same time packing a 1911 probably would have laughed at that. Well, I'm laughing about it now. So anyway, this is the revolver the British adopted in the new age of less is more. So the Enfield No.2 Mark I, adopted 1932 as you've heard, and this was pretty much the way the British tended to like their revolvers. That's to say, it's a top break design. Depress this lever, tip the barrel forward to load. Also, see if you can see this, when you do that, a star-shaped ejector, can you see that? Well, there we go. A star-shaped ejector automatically pops out the spent casings, and live rounds were actually left in the cylinder. So it functioned in an identical way to its Webley predecessors, and there are more similarities than that. Between the Webley and the Enfield, the internals were mostly very similar, not quite identical, but on the outside, these were virtually identical to the Webleys. And that fact wasn't lost on Webley, by the way, who sued the British government arsenal Enfield. It was a big thing for a while, and Enfield brought that on themselves, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, the Enfield No.2 Mark I revolver would serve as a standard British sidearm during World War II. And a double action only version, as in without a hammer spur, the Mark I Star was introduced for tank crews to keep the hammer spur from catching on anything if a crewman had to bail out of his tank. Its service during the war was considered acceptable, not quite dazzling. It didn't have quite the same punch as the American 45 ACP or 38 Special, the German 9mm, or the Russian 7.62x25 Tokarev round. And when a user had to fire a sidearm, it was because the enemy was close and probably actively trying to kill him. So I hope the anemic stopping power didn't cost too many British troops their lives. But to sum that up, it was a derivative design. It was well, uninspired, uninspiring, we'll put it that way. And it fired a round that could be best described as mediocre. But in British service, it did what was needed, and that's not nothing. The Enfield No.2 Mark I served with British and Commonwealth forces during the years after the war and was officially replaced by the Browning High Power in 1957. That wasn't completely the end of the Enfield revolver in British service, though. It continued serving in one capacity or another into the 60s. Now, these are nifty shooters, to be sure, for those of us who don't use them to shoot to live. So, how about we get it to the range and have a little fun with our zombie clown? And just so you know, I have been getting some misfires here and there with this. I don't know if the revolver is just giving me weak hits or if it's the ammo I'm using. I do not use surplus ammo, so that certainly isn't it. So, misfires. Do be ready for that. And, if you wish, feel free to help keep this channel going by supporting us on Patreon. There is a link in the description. So, let's hit it. Welcome to the Municipal Shooting Range in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. And this time we've brought the Enfield No.2. Well, I'm a little curious about what this is going to do to a bleeding zombie clown, so let's go ahead and get it loaded and find out. And, as usual, for our first shoot, we're going to be going single action. So, let's get started. That is so cool. The Enfield No.2 Mark I revolver had a production run that lasted from 1932 to 1963, with about 325,000 of all types made. But for quite a few years afterward, it saw quite a bit of service as a military and police revolver, even accepting Commonwealth nations like Australia, New Zealand, or Canada. About a dozen other countries got some use out of it. Israel actually made it without license for a while. And I have to admit, the revolver itself is perfectly serviceable. It did its job. And I think we've already harped on its weak cartridge enough. But the revolver itself is a pretty fine piece. It's certainly an enjoyable range gun. And it's also a very attractive shooter for milsurp types like myself. But the real fun is by getting out to the range and shooting it, so we're going to do a little bit more. All right, everybody. Back to Truth or Consequences. We're going one more time with the Enfield No.2 revolver, and we're going to go double action this time. This thing's got a pretty heavy double action trigger pull, and, well, we'll see if I can hit him. He's not that far away, but, you know, we're never certain. But, let's dance. Misfire, but what can you do? That's 5 holes at least. I guess that's going to have to do it. So that, loyal viewers, was our episode on the Enfield No.2. Thank you so much for watching, and I do hope you enjoyed it. And if you like what we do on this channel, you probably know what to do. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I would appreciate it. But I am the Pony 314, and I will see you at the range.